seems like there's a lie in our culture that says that bigger's better. And I wonder if sometimes in our churches, in a desire to reach more people, maybe we hire more staff so we can reach more people. Maybe we reach more people, and then we get more people, and we need a bigger building to hold the people that we have.
Yeah.
So we get a bigger building. And when we get the bigger building, we got to get more people to fill that building, so we need more staff to get more people in the building. Do you think that maybe our churches are just, we curse ourselves by making ourselves too big, which incapacitates us from being able to give in the first place?
Well, I think it's possible for us to do that. The one thing I want to avoid doing is basically nixing the larger church, not in order to be politically correct, but because I have seen larger churches that do hands-on evangelism, discipleship, mentoring in very effective ways, and then there are many small churches that some people would glorify because they're small that are not doing those things. But some small churches and medium-sized churches are very effectively reaching people, while some larger churches aren't. But no matter what our size, wealth is relative, and so any church can spend too much on stuff, too much on buildings, whether that's a small building, a medium-sized building, or a large building. But I think you're right. I think sometimes we basically add things to the attractiveness of Christ, and we got to do this, we got to do that. On the other hand, when our church, a church where I was a pastor at for years, and we were in a high school auditorium, and then when we moved into our building, it wasn't an extravagant building in law, I just saw how God allowed us to use that tool, that facility, and things were happening that weren't happening when we were in the high school auditorium. Whereas some churches, they stay in a high school auditorium forever. Great, good for them. And then they do the home Bible studies. They pull it off, and it's wonderful. But in other cases, I thought, we're able to use this. And then when we were looking at a bigger building, I was sort of hesitant. By then, I wasn't on pastoral staff, and I wasn't exactly sure we needed this. And then when I found out that in the old foyer area, they were going to have a coffee shop, and then I went, coffee shop. Oh, man, I don't know. Well, you know what? I've changed my mind. And it's not just because I like coffee. I do, but it's not because of that. It's because one night, through a long thing, a wallet had fallen out of a guy's car, actually his boat, which was being pulled by his car. My wife had been meeting me at church. I was coming from another direction. She brings his wallet in, gives it to me. I see that he lives about a half mile down the street from his address. I call him, and instead of offering to drop it by his house, I said, I'm over here at the church, and he says, yeah, I know. And he's kind of getting suspicious. And so I said, well, why don't you just drop by? Just come on in. Just come over to the front door of the church, and, I'll look for you. Well, I went over, and I bought him a coffee. And when he came in the door, I gave him the coffee, and he looked, he says, wow. So we sit down at a table, this little coffee shop type table, and while the service is going on, I'm sharing the gospel with him. And I prayed with him. He didn't give his life to Christ, but I prayed with him and sharing the gospel. And I thought, you know what? If I was standing here in this crowded foyer with the track rack behind me, this particular guy, I can just guarantee you, we wouldn't have had that conversation. Not in that way. And that was, I think, God's way of teaching me, don't... be open to God doing different things in different places in different ways. But wherever you are, make sure that you do not get captured by the stuff. We do not need to just offer a materialistic world a way to be a materialistic Christian. It needs to be different than that. Things and buildings can be used for God's glory, but it's got to be very deliberate. I quote in Money, Possessions, and Eternity from John White in, what was his book on materialism? The Golden Calf, was that the name of it? And great book. And in it, he talks about being at the China Inland Mission headquarters. I think it was maybe it was the London headquarters. And and he's putting his hand on these bricks, and it's a sacred place. And that's a building. And God used that place to His glory in tremendous ways. And there have been places that God has used, and facilities and buildings that God has used. So let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater, but let's get rid of the bathwater. It needs some changing. So.